Welcome to Formed, where each week we navigate a relevant topic or question through honest conversations. We are three pastors with three different backgrounds on staff together at Irving Bible Church in Irving, Texas. We believe we are constantly being formed in the way of Jesus for the sake of the world, and we hope this podcast helps with that. So let's jump into this week's episode of Formed. Welcome back to another week of Formed, and we're post-Super Bowl.
Post-Super Bowl.
Did you watch Usher?
Yes, of course.
For sure.
Did you sing every word?
I mean, maybe not. I don't want to admit.
I might have had some yes in there, but
Yeah.
that was that's pretty much
I
fine.
had some yes in there. That's great.
So you watched the game. It was fun,
It's a great game.
enjoyable.
Yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah,
I mean, it was.
Yeah.
The second
I was
half.
disappointed. Big Brock Purdy fan.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
His story was cool.
His story is really cool, and he's a good guy. And
So you don't like Taylor Swift?
it was a little irritating to me the number of
come
times
on,
the camera
don't be in
pans
the-
to Taylor and her friends. I know Barry doesn't. He's like, you can't be a hater. I was like,
was
I'm not
great.
a hater. I just think it was too much.
A little excessive.
Yeah,
I didn't have strong feelings one way or the other about the game. I mean, as a lifelong Cowboy fan, I still think I'm not allowed to cheer for the 49ers at this point,
yeah,
even though
yeah.
that rivalry's been ages past.
Yeah.
But, it's still alive and well in some of our hearts. And, the Chiefs, I mean, the Chiefs have been doing it a lot lately, so come on. I don't know. I
tired
didn't
of
feel really strongly one way or the other. But it was an enjoyable game. So
But your Swiftiness.
well,
Also
put me
biased
on,
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
put me
yeah.
on that side of the
I
ledger.
feel like that's true. Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
I recently got a new pizza oven for our back porch.
Nice.
And so
Fancy.
we had a couple families over, and I underestimated how long it would take to fix 16 individual pizzas.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
So I sat down for the first time and watched the game in the third quarter.
Oh my word. Oh my goodness.
But it was fun.
pizzas were good.
We had fun and good pizzas,
That's
at least.
awesome.
Speaking of Super Bowl, today's episode is going to be on the He Gets Us campaign, as you probably seen in the title. And, this is 2 straight years now that this campaign has, bought an ad spot or a couple ad spots in the Super Bowl. And last year, it got, a lot of national news. It's like, wow, Super Bowl ad. Some people just watch the Super Bowl just to see the commercials.
Sure,
Right?
yeah.
I've seen the trailers of movies
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
And so second straight year of it. And, we say in the intro of this podcast, relevant topics, honest conversations. And over the past, 48 or so hours, I feel like one of the, conversations or relevant topics, even in the non-evangelical world, but in the evangelical world too, is this He Gets Us campaign and seeing, it's a polarizing world we live in. There's sides and all this stuff, but seeing different sides argue about it, have opinions about it. I started getting, texts on the night of the Super Bowl, like, "Hey, what's up with this foot washing ad?"
Yeah.
And so I just kind of want to like us talk about it and kind of just, I don't know if y'all want me to set it up. You want to
Yeah, you set it up.
as
what it's
far as
about?
like if you don't know too much about about the campaign,
Yeah.
this group of people came together in 2020. And their kind of mission statement behind it is we want to reintroduce basically this Jesus of the Bible to our world, to our country. And they take this unique approach of like, hey, we want to tell you that Jesus gets you. Like, he understands us. He loves us. And, it just sparked a bunch of different conversations around that. And, so what would you say is kind of like, what do you think the campaign gets right?
Yeah. I think it's worth pointing out, like, there are some legitimate concerns that people are raising, and interesting to see, as you mentioned, kind of polarizing. Like, you get concerns and criticisms kind of from every conceivable direction about this, and so we'll get into some of that. But I think it is interesting to think about, well, what's there that's right, and I don't know. One of the things that I would throw out to start the conversation is just, I think there's an intention that's good, that's well-meaning, that has to do with trying to help people. Really, it's aimed at curious, open-minded seekers, people who are open to consider. But and so it's designed to reintroduce Jesus to those people, recognizing in a lot of ways that Jesus' reputation has kind of been tarnished in a lot of respects because of the church's reputation.
Yeah.
And so how do we reintroduce Jesus to people? So I think there's an intention behind it that's a very noble kind of intention.
Yeah, yeah. I think what they're trying to do, and I think we need to distinguish between who their target audience is.
Yeah.
To your point,
Yeah.
it's skeptics, right?
Right.
It's people that are not followers of Jesus and yet are in some ways open to hearing about Jesus. And it's not targeted to believers. And they're trying to reintroduce Jesus. The love story of Jesus, I think, is how they talk about it on their website. The love story of Jesus. And so they're focusing on the grace, the compassion, the love, the forgiveness, the goodness of Jesus. And they're almost trying to say, look at Jesus. Look at how he interacted with women. Look at how he interacted with the outsider.
Yeah.
And focusing on the love that Jesus has for the marginalized and the vulnerable. And to what you said, Barry, I think we have to be honest and say, as Christians, we have in many ways misrepresented Jesus. And so they're trying to take the focus off the hatred and opposition that is often associated with Christianity today and put the focus back on, look at Jesus, look at who he is. And to your point, I think that's a really beautiful endeavor.
Yeah, many followers of Jesus are sort of known within our culture today for what they're against.
Right.
Yeah.
And that really is so much in contrast to who we see Jesus in the scriptures, the ways in which he is for people, the way in which he shows the wonderful little phrase from Max Lucado's book that's connected to this campaign, the confounding love of Jesus. So I would say, in terms of what does it get right, I think it gets right, the confounding love of Jesus. Sometimes in these ads put on display in ways that are, for those of us that are sort of insiders, if you will, they're a little bit disruptive, a little bit
it's shocking.
disorienting.
Yeah.
It's intended to sort of be shocking, I think, and yet I think the love of Jesus is shocking. I think it's confounding. And so I think that's one thing that it gets right. So I think there's a noble intention behind it. I think that the ways in which they've portrayed the confounding love of Jesus is pretty powerful. I think also there's something even in the statement, he gets us, that's worth kind of underscoring in terms of its importance. Theologically, right? That I think somebody posts something to the effect of, it's not so much about he gets us as that we get him, right? And the gift, and I think that's
true.
That's true, right? But there's also something important to say about he gets us, that he is the God who has taken on flesh to dwell among us. That he understands the human experience in every way, because he has gone through that human experience. He understands suffering because he experienced suffering in his body as the God-man. And so something really important about the idea he gets us, that points us to the truth of the incarnation, that the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us.
He's a sympathetic Savior.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think what's really great about what they've done, and quite honestly, I'd not been on to their website until this morning, but what they're trying to do is build a bridge between these ad campaigns which take place or which are aired Super Bowl, other big events, but also on other social media platforms, but build a bridge from that to drive people to their website. And what I found really interesting of the way they're asking people to take action is connect with Jesus through the scriptures. So learn more about who Jesus is by reading the Bible.
They have different reading plans.
That are in YouVersion, but then also connect with others locally. And so driving people towards churches and alpha experiences where you have questions about Jesus. Here's a place you can go to that's in your community where you can find out more about who Jesus is. And the last stat I read was there was, I think, 600,000 people that dodownloaded those reading plans.
Did the reading plan.
That's pretty amazing that you get 600,000 people to start reading the Bible off of a 30-second ad. So I think that the way they have done that has been really, really cool to see how people are engaging with Scripture and with churches.
Yeah, Alpha, is a ministry we have here at our church, and I thought that was just super fascinating when I was reading more into it, that they have a direct line to Alpha and finding your Alpha group to ask these questions. And we always talk about, when we talk about the next Alpha launch happening here at our church, of like, this is the spot where you have questions about who Jesus is or life or a purpose, or like all these, big questions that a lot of us have sometimes, but you just don't know where to ask them.
Yeah.
This is where that
Safe
happens,
place
a
for
safe
that.
place at an alpha. And you said something a little bit ago, Barry, about being known more for what you're against instead of what you're for.
Yeah.
Why is that dangerous why is that concept dangerous for Christians, believers, churches in general?
Well, I mean, I think that it can wind up creating the kind of experience that this campaign is, I think, designed to overcome, which is the association of Jesus with our posture of being anti this, that, or the other. And I mean, I think, we can imagine several different things that you could fill in the blank of anti that gets associated with Christians. And yet, so much of what you see in the life and ministry of Jesus is this idea of confounding love, that his compassion, we've talked before about the most frequently used word to describe the emotional disposition of Jesus is he is moved with compassion. And so if Jesus is most known for compassion, but we're most known for the things that we stand in opposition to, oftentimes that sense of that posture of opposition is connected to some perception of lost cultural power. And so we wind up trying to defend cultural power. We wind up trying to make ourselves more comfortable within our cultural environment, cultural setting, than really being preoccupied with how are we representing the confounding love of Jesus, the compassion of Jesus to the world around us. I've thought time and again about that little phrase, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And yet I think that sometimes Christians really just get kind of caught up in cursing the darkness, pointing out what's wrong with the world around us. And look, there's some darkness that's worth cursing, right? There's some things that we need to speak against and to stand against. And yet, that we would be known for lighting a candle, that we would actually be people who bring light into the darkness around us, because I think that's what we see in the life of Jesus.
We miss the beauty and the goodness of Jesus when all we talk about is what we're against. It's not to say we shouldn't stand up for things that are right, and yet if that's all we focus on, we're not showing people the attractiveness and the beauty and the wonder of Jesus. And when you look at Jesus' life, to your point, he's so countercultural. Yeah. He breaks all these barriers. He's always drawn towards, you read the Gospels, and he's drawn towards the other. To the way he engages with women. In our day, it doesn't seem that shocking, and yet it's completely shocking in the culture in which Jesus lived in. The way he engages with the marginalized and the vulnerable, the leper and the those that are sick and poor, that's who's drawn to Jesus. And that is the opposite of often what we do when we're just talking about what we're against. Yeah.
Jesus, I think, divides the world into two kind of people in essence, right? Neighbors and enemies. And his command to one is to love them, and his command to the other is to love them. And I think this campaign is trying to sort of put that on display, again, in ways that are shocking, disorienting, wait, what's happening? And yet, I think that's part of the point. When you read the Gospels, you are shocked by the people that Jesus loves and the way in which he loves them.
Yeah.
It's good.
Last year's ad, folks, it just showed so many like still images in black and white of these points of division and these of heavy emotion and anger and that we see in our country. And and then this year's bigger ad with the feet washing. It was so like polarizing, because at first I was like, I don't know if I would have went this angle with it, but it got people talking.
Sure.
It's like, what is this? Yeah. And it showed these different combinations of people that on paper or like in our world, you're like, oh, that you wouldn't see that, but it's showing these combinations of people having this sacrificial act with somebody in front of them that they might not be connected with normally, and it's asking, you're kind of asking yourself that question, like, why are they doing that? Why would they do that? So on their website, the kind of like mission statement behind the campaign is, He Gets Us is a movement to reintroduce people to Jesus of the Bible and his confounding love and forgiveness. We believe his words, example, and life have relevance in our lives today and offer hope for a better future. Why do you think there needs to be, or maybe not needs to be, but why do you think it is applicable to us about this reintroduction to of us, of this reintroduction of people to the Jesus of the Bible? We kind of touched on some about how the church has kind of done some damage to that. But why do you think a reintroduction could be really beneficial for some people?
I think we live in a world where there's been so much division, so much discord, so much political polarization, and you've got things like Christian nationalism, all sorts of different things where the church, Christianity is associated with. And I think it's an opportunity to simply say to people, look at Jesus, look at how he lives, look at what he does, and to draw people in. That's not the entire story of the gospel, and yet it's an opportunity to draw people in to say there might be something here that you haven't understood, or you need to hear again because you haven't actually seen Jesus. And so for that reason, I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, and so I think the heart underneath it is wanting to see people experience the real Jesus and come to faith. And there is this moment in Acts 17 where Paul is walking around the city of Athens, and he sees all of the religious imagery of the city and just has this deep sense of burden for the people in that city who he sees as lost, as needing hope and needing healing and needing truth. And so that's what then leads to this moment of his connection on Mars Hill, the Areopagus, and he has this opportunity to build bridges to their cultural experience, to kind of speak their language, if you will, to try to introduce them to the truth of the gospel, the resurrection of Christ. They think he's crazy, but there's some of them who listen and who pay attention and want to hear more about this story of Jesus. And so, that idea of trying to build bridges for people to actually hear the truth about who Jesus is, in many respects, where people, I think, many in our cultural moment sort of think they know. And so this is an opportunity to try to maybe sneak past those defenses in some sense, right? Of like, I already know about that. Well, let me come at it sideways, right? Let me introduce it differently in ways that may cause you to rethink what you think you know.
Yeah. I think about, I grew up in the church. I read the scriptures all my life, and it wasn't until I was a senior in college where I really came into a genuine relationship with the Lord, or recommitted my life to the Lord. And it was because I began reading the scriptures and I began seeing how Jesus interacted with those that were considered the outsider. And I think that's what they're trying to draw people to, is to take a look at Jesus with a fresh set of eyes almost. Everything you've heard, everything you think you know, maybe there's something else that you're missing, and I think that's what they're trying to get at.
Yeah,
that's good.
Well, what are some of the concerns around the campaign?
So I think one of the major concerns is this focus on the humanity of Jesus. And so a lot of the focus on they're 30-second ads. I'm not sure if they could fully explain the divinity of Jesus in 30 seconds. But and so one of the criticisms is it's presenting Jesus as a good moral example and not as the savior of the world. So it's not a tool for evangelism. And I would think that the creators of the campaign would probably argue, well, that's not the intent. The intent isn't a presentation of the gospel. And you can do this so much better than me, but talking about pre-evangelism as an idea of the idea behind that is, but could we get people drawn into a conversation to begin engaging about who is Jesus, so that later on we can talk about the proclamation of the gospel.
Yeah. I mean, this really is pre-evangelism.
Yeah.
It's not, right? Evangelism, we would say, is the communication, the explicit communication of the content of the gospel, which has to do with Christ's life, death, and resurrection. And this is focusing on Christ's life. Now, what's interesting is that part of, I think, some of that concern critique that Christians raise about it not getting the full gospel is because it doesn't get the death and resurrection part.
Right.
I think that in many respects in the past, we've so focused on the cross, even to some extent to neglect of the resurrection. And so it's all about Jesus' death and the focus on what happened when Jesus died and what's going to happen when I die. And I'm not downplaying that at all. It's just the reality of Christ's life that led to his death, that led to his resurrection, this campaign really focuses on Jesus' life and Jesus' love in ways that I think really are important and question posing, causing people to want to explore more about someone who lived this way and loved this way, that then gets them into a reading plan, 600,000 people that have engaged with the reading plan, that then leads them to read about, learn about Christ's death and Christ's resurrection. So it's pre-evangelism. It's a setup for a conversation to lead people into further consideration, exploration of the fullness of the gospel. It's not something that's intended to try to convey all of the gospel in one 15-second, 30-second, 60-second spot.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of concern around that piece of it. There is, again, as we've kind of alluded, in this very polarized cultural moment, it gets politicized, right? And you get criticisms from kind of both directions politically.
Which is kind of when you know you're doing something right, right?
Honestly,
when you get rocks thrown at you from both ways, maybe, So, there are people from the left who are concerned that this is funded by very conservative people, and so is there some kind of hidden agenda underneath it that these people are trying to get across through this campaign? People on the right who are looking at it going, this is presenting a woke vision of Jesus. These conservative people have been sort of pulled into some kind of agenda that they don't realize what they're getting themselves into. And I think both of those kind of critiques wind up just missing
the intent.
The intent and what's there, I think, on display that really is intended to try to get people thinking more deeply about who is Jesus. And so, it gets, I think, unfortunately, highly politicized.
Yeah. The I put a question here. I didn't know exactly how to word it, but is it, if you disagree with companies like donations or who they support, because sometimes I'm like, hey, I just went to this place and bought some bologna. Like, it doesn't mean I hold every single belief of what their CEO did, but am I wrong in that? Should I care? How do you balance that? Is that a personal opinion thing? Because yes, I've seen a lot of that of hey, tracking down, you have this campaign, the heart behind this campaign, but also there's just, I'm going to track down to where all the supporters, where they gave to or donated, supported. And so
I think part of what is underneath the question there is what I've seen as kind of the biggest concern. And I think it is a legitimate concern that has to do with just how much money is being spent on this, right? I mean, this is a really significant amount of money that people will go, well, couldn't we spend that money on, feeding poor people and multiple different things that are thrown out as we could spend this money better in this kind of direction. And I think that's something to genuinely wrestle with, how much money is being spent on this. The impact has been significant, the exposure, the number of people that are talking about Jesus, thinking about Jesus, engaged in dialogue about Jesus, engaged the Bible reading plan, etc., making those connections to churches coming through this. And yet it still is a staggering amount of money that we're talking about here that we ought to sort of have some tension around. There's also just the reality, the dynamic that we may not think that that's the best way for that money to be spent. And come up with other things that kind of money could be spent on. And yet this is the heart that these folks had, that they want to invest these funds to do. And so I find myself less concerned about that idea of this is what they're doing with their money. How can we, who are followers of Jesus, engage in conversations that are being generated because this money is being spent, while also recognizing our calling as a church, our calling as believers here at IBC is to move toward the broken places and hurting people in the world around us, is to mobilize resources, to mobilize people to help address issues of homelessness in our community, help address issues of poverty in our community, addressing things that are happening around the world with regard to access to clean drinking water or girls that have been rescued from sex trafficking. Some of the things that we're passionate, committed to, involved in here, that we mobilize our resources that God has entrusted to us, and then recognize that the money that's being spent on this campaign provides an opportunity for us to engage in some deeper conversations about Jesus.
Yeah, I read the ads that ran just this past Sunday for the Super Bowl for a total of 75 seconds cost an estimated $17.5 million. And then initially when this campaign started, it was a 1-year campaign for $100 million, and now it's a 3-year campaign for $1 billion. And so, rightly so, the question is, like, is that the best way to use this money? How, to your point, how could we be using this money more effectively for the kingdom and to meet tangible needs of people? And yet, it's happening, right? And so there's always, I mean, whenever something like this happens, there's always, I can think of a better way to do it, and all sorts of different ideas of how we could do it a whole lot better. And yet, it's happening, and there's an opportunity for us to engage. So if this happens Sunday night, Monday morning when you're at work or at school or throughout this week, you can be beginning spiritual conversations with people talking about this. That is something that I think a lot of us are missing by just criticizing what they're doing, right? Because the intent really is, I think, a noble intent, a beautiful endeavor to say, let's present people with who Jesus is, and have them talking about and at least getting them interested in, maybe this is something I should think about, whether that's through the Bible reading plan, through Alpha, or through conversations with us. And I think so many of us are missing that. And we tend, if we could be more gracious and kind with thinking about, well, of course there's a better way to do it, but could we actually engage with what's going on? Because it's still happening, regardless of what I think is a better way to do it. So I think that's one way to go after it. I think last year, when ad companies ran all their research, it was the most talked about ad of the Super Bowl. So that says something about, that's a valuable tool for us to use to start engaging people around, hey, what'd you think about that? Who is Jesus? What are your thoughts around that? And that's the kind of people we want to be.
I mean, I've had two conversations since the Super Bowl with non-believers about the ad. So I'm like, something is, sparking those conversations with that. So speaking of the money part, does this apply to your private jet?
Yeah, right.
I'm just kidding, guys. Just kidding. Barry does not have a private jet.
We're not that church. I until just recently, I had a car that I was literally holding together with duct tape. And it's funny because I heard from a member of our congregation who had a friend who had passed away not that long ago, but that part of her faith journey and part of her connection even back to church at IBC was actually seeing me at the grocery store, going and getting into my old duct tape together car, and just
literally duct tape
together. But that recognizing like that we're not the private jet and the fancy car kind of church. And I loved hearing that story of this, person who's like, all right, I think I could go to a church whose pastor drives that kind of piece of junk car. So
I could at least listen to him.
That's right. That's right.
She's like, I got to buy him some saltine crackers or something. All right. Well, thanks for having the conversation. That's, we like trying to hit some relevant topics right now. And if you've been wondering about the campaign, you can go to the website and learn about that. And hopefully this, answered some questions or heard some dialogue, about it. We always have some banter at the end. And this week's question that I gave for homework was, if you could pass into law any new law, what would it be? And we're going the lighter route.
The lighter route.
Yes.
The lighter route. I'll give mine first,
'Kay.
just to set the table. I think the day after the Super Bowl should be a national holiday.
Ah,
I think people should be off work. I think it should just be a thing. There's so many people who watch the Super Bowl.
Whether the Cowboys are in the Super Bowl or not.
Exactly. No.
Yeah, because
And
it's probably not happening.
It's been a while, yeah. I just, and there's so many people who like do things around the Super Bowl that don't even like sports either.
It's true, yeah.
That just, or at least line it up with, President's Day to where like
that's right.
we're a weekend off.
We can celebrate presidents the day after Super Bowl, but let's
First,
combine.
the Super Bowl. Yeah.
But anyway, I just think the day after the Super Bowl, everybody should be off work. It should be a holiday. That's what I would pass.
That's yours.
Okay.
Barry, do you have one yet?
Yeah, you go.
Or should
All
we
right,
go to
so
Sissy?
I was struggling with this earlier because I was like, I don't know, but my son is in the studio with us and helps us produce the podcast, and so he was able to pretty quickly identify the things that really irritate me and annoy me. So he suggested maybe a law about passengers turning on a light inside the car when driving at night, and so that's definitely one of those that I get pretty
Irked by?
pretty irked by,
Yeah.
and apparently the said son of mine has experienced my being irked when the light gets turned on inside the car. So, and then the other thing that definitely gets under my skin is loud people in hotels, particularly in hallways of hotels, which again, my kid has experienced my being irritated when our family is generating the noise in the hotel. And so, definitely that's one of those
Yeah.
that's a
So you
pet
recognize
peeve.
like when it's,
when
when
it's
the Jones family.
I definitely do that. Well, I'm trying to do the, do unto others as you would have them.
courteous, yeah.
It makes me so crazy when people are loud in the hallway or even in their hotel room for other people to do it. So I don't want to do that to others.
Yeah.
So yeah, my kids have experienced the wrath of dad about
So-
being loud in hotels.
So basically, if somebody turns the light on in the car, it's like straight to juvie.
Exactly. There we go.
All right.
Yeah.
He's totally out on
Yeah.
that.
Like, hey,
Can't do it.
what'd you do, Connor? I'll turn the light on in the back seat.
Want to cross Barry Jones? Turn the light on. But the first thing I thought of was not driving the speed limit. That's like should be outlawed in the left lane. Not
Okay.
driving
Not
the
driving the
in the
driving
left lane.
under the speed
Yes.
limit.
Yes. That is just wrong.
Not driving this. Okay.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
at least have to drive the speed limit. And I would say, and I want to make sure that Irving PD is not listening to us. I think my rule is 5 and over, you're fine. 5 miles over the speed limit.
That's what I operate with.
That's
yeah.
a fair. I feel like
But you
that's
can't make
okay.
that a law, or else you just like up the speed limit.
Well, I think we should probably do that too. I mean, it's one of the things I love about living in Texas is the speed limit. I go back to New Jersey now. I'm like, I don't understand why everyone's driving so slow. So anyway, that's mine because that irks me.
Okay.
Hot takes on the speed limit from Pastor Sissy.
That's right.
There
Yeah.
we go.
Is there an age limit for driving?
Oh,
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I
Right?
don't think so.
All right.
You can get your license taken away.
Yeah.
But-
yeah. Okay. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, I wonder if there's an
Maybe.
age limit for
Yeah,
driving.
I don't think so.
All right. So there's our laws.
There we go.
Elect us to office, and this is what you would get right here. All right. We'll be back next week for another week of Form.